And you have to be so front-footed. It astonishes me how many people I will see running stands at conferences where the staff, they're just sort of sitting there.
Stand there with their head down.
Standing with their head down, no eye contact, It doesn't matter what you speak. We have did you get your little book?
Yeah.
But find something that you can do that allows you to open your mouth to every single person who comes past. Ordinary forms of marketing will just go into a black hole, deal with it later. That's why actually having a physical object brought in front of their eyes seems to be the thing that is working best for us.
Yeah.
Teachers think, I know people just like that. I hadn't thought of it before, but now you say it's obvious, and you've then got them hooked in.
Yes.
Because what you're doing, you're not hitting them with something new, you're hitting them with something that they already know, but they didn't realise they knew. Then I went into teaching, did that for 3 or 4 years, but then discovered that I'm not very good at working for other people. And so I went back to being my own boss via an outdoor education company, which also runs gifted stuff for kids.
Hi everybody, welcome to the latest MECast episode with me, Mike. Today we've got our special guest Jason Buckley here to talk about all things marketing. Jason is the co-founder of The Philosophy Man and Outspark and also various other business enterprises. So welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Mike.
Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, lovely to be here.
Great. Well, I suppose, would you mind, you've got lots of different business ventures.
Right.
Would you mind just getting started, telling us a little bit about yourself and a bit about your business?
Okay, so I studied philosophy at university.
Yeah.
And then when I finished that, I ran various businesses, 50p in a pound shops, all sorts of things that had nothing to do with what I'm doing at the moment. And then I went into teaching, did that for 3 or 4 years, but then discovered that I'm not very good at working for other people. And so I went back to being my own boss via an outdoor education company, which also runs gifted stuff for kids, and discovered philosophy for children in 2009. Did loads of training in that, and now that business sees me training teachers up and down this country and also abroad. So very butterfly-minded sort of person, which is probably how I've ended up with all these different businesses rather than just staying in one lane and concentrating on that.
And what are the age ranges for the philosophy business?
So I work with kids down in reception.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that. Other people work with kids in nursery, but for me, nursery, like reception, is like the frontiers of my domain. Nursery is going beyond the pale. So I prefer people to take what I've showed them and then take it into nursery themselves. There's little people crawling all over me is a little bit.
Yeah, my son's in
much.
reception.
Yes, yeah,
my
reception.
daughter's in nursery, so I can see who you'd want to pitch.
Yeah,
to.
big difference, and then right the way up to 18-year-olds.
Wonderful. And a little bit about Outspark as well.
Yeah, so when I was a teacher, Duke of Edinburgh is one of those activities in schools where someone will say, "Oh, can you just hold this for me for a minute?" And then maybe 15 years later, you're still holding it. That's how it works. Really worthwhile stuff. So I started running the award while I was teaching at Sutton Grammar School in South London, and then we had our sixth formers were being trained on a scheme to roll out outdoor leadership to sixth formers because there's a big shortage of volunteers. And I took that national. That didn't quite work out. Government changed the funding system, but I carried on expanding that business beyond running the expeditions for that school. Now we work with, I think, 9 or 10 different schools in that hat. And then there's another offshoot from that Duke of Edinburgh Awards business, Hidden Leaders, which is a kind of collaboration between the Philosophy Man and Outspark in origin. It's now run by the staff from those two businesses as their own company. I'm a shareholder in it, but Alex from Outspark, Tom from the Philosophy Man run that together.
Yeah.
And they have budded that off into a really successful and growing enterprise. That does a mixture of outdoorsy and thinky stuff to help sixth formers and kids who are new to a school to communicate better, develop leadership and teamwork and so on.
It's exactly what I was thinking. The enterprise, the leadership, values, open-mindedness, exploring new boundaries. And it ties in with the philosophy as well. So although they're separate and different, I can see the link between the two.
Yeah.
And how has that sort of helped you with business and marketing in terms of the principles?
So I would say in the last couple of years, particularly last year, is where we've started to not standardise things, but we've got people playing to their strengths across the businesses. So Tom is our sort of website guru, among many other things. He did a great job on the new Hidden Leaders website. And then it's a little bit like if you maybe get a new piece of furniture, or you decorate one room in your house, then all the other rooms start to look a bit dated.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now he's gradually working his way through the other businesses, doing a similar job on those. And he's done that with a lot of sort of marketing principles in mind, keeping things really nice and clear, thinking about exactly what our offer is and what the hooks are to bring people in.
And with your offer and the hook you mentioned, what would you say is your USP compared to any other competitors out there?
So I think with Hidden Leaders, and with that one, it is that combination of the traditional team building. This is the lava swamp that you've got to get over without touching the grass, etc. So those traditional team building activities. Then with some of the intellectual property that's come over from the Philosophy Man, things like there's loads of riddles that I've written. So we have an activity called Speculate to Accumulate, where they're almost investing in guesses and clues and questions to try and solve riddles. And there's an element there about risk and reward, as well as the challenge of solving the riddles. There are bits of philosophy in there. There is sort of live debating, a thing called argument tag wrestling. So we've got a wider range of different things to play on, so that each day can be made bespoke to the school, but it doesn't take a huge amount of resource from us in order to make it bespoke. I think the absolute death of any business is if with every new customer you've got to start again from scratch.
So you've got a framework, you've got a base, and
we've got a framework.
From there.
It's almost like a sort of modular system that we've got, and then we can think, okay, which modules can we just clip together to create the perfect day for that customer? So it is absolutely right for them, but we haven't had to make everything up from scratch just for that
That's
one.
a clever model.
One-off.
And how do you go about reaching and engaging with your potential customers?
So we do quite a lot is word of mouth, as with any business. The most recent strategy we've adopted there, which has been really successful, is old-fashioned shoe leather. What we're calling the less polite term, we're calling it mugging the schools. Not because any physical violence is involved, but because we've had really nice mugs branded up, and we go round. There's in that mug there is a copy of one of our little A6 mini books. So that is, I'm sure we'll get onto that, is the sort of flagship info product for each business, is some sort of A6 mini books. There's a physical proof of expertise there, and something that's of use to the customer, even if they never buy from you. So it's more service than sales.
And even
what I mean?
The size, there's a point of difference to what you normally receive. So.
Absolutely. And then a biscuit and a tea bag, and a little sales letter that finishes with the cheesy line about "Hope you enjoyed your cup of tea."
So the biscuit, a bit of old-fashioned bribery.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Absolutely. And just going round, and sometimes we've got a name there. Sometimes we're fishing for a name, so we're going into reception, and this is for whoever deals with sort of character development in your sixth form. It might be whatever market we're particularly targeting at that time. And of course, what you then come away with is you've then got a name, and you've got the follow-up, because receptionists will always tell you who you're dealing with. So.
Is there any resistance to what you're offering? Because to me, it sounds perfect. It's amazing, all the different values we talked about, and also away from the screen time and giving something extra to children and help them develop. But do you get any resistance from the schools or education providers?
So the biggest difficulty is probably getting in front of people, and then scheduling, and the fact that schools are so time poor.
Yeah.
So a very big part, and I'd say this to anyone who's trying to sell anything into schools at the moment, especially state schools in the UK, if you've ever been at a point in your life where you've been so sort of overwhelmed that the tiniest other thing is just too much, and I can't deal with that now, feels like that's the default state for schools at the moment. I was talking to somebody a while ago who was saying, in a kind of council capacity, they're encouraging schools to take up offers of like 10 grand of free building work to make them more environmental. Marketing, it's hard to get just go into a black hole, deal with it later. That's why actually having a physical object brought in front of their eyes seems to be the thing that is working best for us.
Yeah, I retrained as a primary school teacher over lockdown, actually, and I did see that everyone is was time poor, and
Yeah,
anything extra,
yeah.
even if it added value, where did the time come from? So I can
Exactly.
see that. The tangible things are interesting, because obviously also when you're at schools, on the school table, there are things to look at and engage with when you've got your breaks. And tell me a little bit more about the importance from your perspective, because you said tangible items a few times,
Yes.
about the impact that they can
Yeah.
have.
Yeah. So this sort of evolved from the very first thing that I did in, because a lot of this has been sort of discovered, if you like, rather than researched or deliberately invented. It's what we've ended up doing, and then we've noticed what works. So just when I ran my very first training session for philosophy for children with the school I was working at the time, I created a little A6 mini book. Reprographics did it, and that was just bits of A4 paper. And then as soon as I started doing my own stuff, I expanded that into a printed book, decent quality paper and cover, and immediately that started to establish my brand. There were people who had been training in philosophy for children for 10, 15, 20 years, but none of them had got a little book that they could give out to all the participants that they trained. And so being established as an author, I mean, that was self-published. We did get it on Amazon and so on, did quite well out of sales on there. But a physical book, even back then, even the small book, was a proof of expertise. The fact that it's small, even then, met teachers' need for things they could digest easily, and also the production need that you can actually use these as giveaways. It's something that's got value. We sell them for $2.99, but the printing costs are quite low. But I think all those things that were there 15 years ago, so much more important now because of the way the internet has gone, the vast deluges of information, AI, etc.
So it gave the teachers and the companies reassurance that what you're offering, because you put the time and the resource into it, and it was something physical as well, rather than just something online or what you could speak about.
Yeah.
And what other... So you've spoken about your handbook, essentially. What other sort of tangible items have you seen good examples of that businesses are using at the moment?
So, to be honest, I haven't, because the things that when you go to a conference and you see what people have got on their stands, for example, what they've got is they've got sales material and they've got giveaways. But the giveaways aren't relevant to them.
Yeah.
Why is a pen from a plumber any proof of expertise or anything useful compared to a plumber?
It's always a pen and a key ring.
Pen and a key ring, or a gonk, or a fidget toy, or whatever it might be. None of these things. You're just buying physical stuff for no real reason. The reason we give out those mugs is because the mug is the vehicle, it's the packaging that we use to get the actual message, which is the book, to the potential customer. But other than that, if it's not proving your expertise, it's so obviously sales. It's got to be service rather than sales. So it's a physical object that is doing the same job as a blog or an email list, etc., but which is physical rather than digital, because digital is abundant, and whatever is abundant lacks scarcity, lacks value. I don't know about you. If I'm on LinkedIn, if I see anything which has got a list or bullet points, I just assume now it's written by AI, and I don't even glance at it, because there's so much of this trash about now.
There is. The mug's also interesting because in that particular environment, it will be their downtime when they're having thinking time and can contemplate what your offering is. So obviously there's relevance there. I was having a conversation yesterday with the marketing director of a print firm, actually. And they were so passionate about when people say print's dead, and this is to do with tangible, that really riles her. And she gave some fantastic examples about how they're producing, especially around the textures of the paper at the moment and the visuals. They do a lot of conference exhibition stands. And it was very interesting hearing about it. And I'm hearing a lot about the resurgence of print and tangible items. Also linked to with movies and DVDs and Blu-rays and vinyl, which has been especially strong. Why do you think that print media and print marketing is making such a comeback at the moment?
So I think that there is a status to print, and there's a similar thing in schools actually, and in teaching. Digital is ubiquitous, cheap, abundant, analog has a certain kind of nostalgia to it. And for example, I was on a first aid course at the weekend with Matt Eilert, DPD training, different perspectives training, I think it is. Fantastic trainer, horror makeup and everything.
Yeah.
And I've been on any number of first aid courses in the past where there's been a PowerPoint, and I literally struggled to stay awake. I'm thinking, I know this is to do with saving somebody's life, but I'm so bored, I can't stay awake. He didn't have a PowerPoint at all. He had a little whiteboard on which he created the course sort of built up on there, and then when you were revising stuff, you'd rub stuff off and you'd fill it in again. And now, whereas 15, 20 years ago, maybe digital had an element of novelty and quality to it, now digital is the basic and analog is the artisan thing almost. Yeah. We're moving towards a situation where anything which is a physical object or anything which very much feels like it's been produced by a human being has a sort of provenance to it. You know, there's that sort of artisanal quality to things that aren't actually artisanal now, that might be mass produced, but the fact they're a physical object rather than digital still gives them that kind of cachet and that reassuring sense that it was definitely a person that made this, and this is not just part of the vast sea of information that is constantly threatening to overwhelm me.
I also think that you can, when you're touching something, you feel something. There is the value attached to it, isn't there? You're feeling that investment has gone into said product. Yeah. Whereas sometimes the digital, it's there, but you're not able. You can engage with it in a certain degree, but feeling it, touching it. Yes. In some cases, the smell as well. Yeah. It emits a different sense of value, and I feel that gives a slight sense of personalization as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a concept in biology, what's called costly signaling. Like, stags with their big antlers, I'm strong enough to survive with these antlers. They've cost me a lot of effort and calories. And I think with good quality print stuff, there is that sense that you are being valued enough that this product has been, this object has been made and given to you. Everyone knows you can press a button and email, a million people at the same time, So.
I think what's particularly pleasing from my perspective about this resurgence is that it's also not just an age, a generational thing. No. Younger ages are also appreciating it as well, and I think that's really important. It's not just a resurgence in the older demographic. Yeah, there's a realization in the younger demographic that there's something more to it out there. Yeah, and seeing people, reading a book. And the enjoyment that people get to it. And if you have a magazine or a book on a table, people still gravitate towards it naturally. Yeah. Regardless of what is there, you still want to investigate. That's right. So I think that's an important aspect as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than having to type something in. Yes. Or dictate something to get something, you are feeding it. Whereas when there's something that you're reading, it arguably comes to you. And I think that's got a different dynamic, which is pleasing to see. Yeah,
I think the thing is, if you think about it in terms of what's competing for attention, if someone is in front of their screen, then there's an almost effectively infinite number of potential competitors for their attention at that moment. If you've got a physical object which they take with them to somewhere where they are not in front of their screen, then there's sort of orders of magnitude difference there, far, far fewer competitors for their attention at that time, and once they've picked up the book, then you've got them locked in for a bit. So.
I've been speaking with clients as well about mail-out campaigns at the moment. Yeah. Again, the print tangible resurgence. And one of the interesting points they said was instead of just sending a postcard, because you can see maybe who it's from or the message, and it might just go in the bin straight away. It's being sent in an envelope. Yes. Because to get to that point, you've got to open the envelope. And by that point, you're intrigued enough. And again, you're touching, you're feeling it more. Yeah. So you've invested more into it, and therefore the results are much higher. Yeah. And it's those simple little things, which I really like, the little tweaks. To go, how am I going to drive engagement with what was an old-fashioned way of doing it, but it's now made a resurgence because the interest levels have gone up. So I think it's great. And your handbook, you've taken it to a new level. And actually, regards to that, so you've talked about the importance almost of the vehicle in that respect. But within that, people that are engaging, and if the content isn't relevant or interesting to them, then you've lost them. So what are your kind of top tips for content creation for businesses, or even speak about your own businesses.
So I think within all the information that we send out, what we're trying to do in those mini books is to provide a proof of expertise. And I would say the key things, well, a couple of key things. One is you don't want to bombard people with science.
Yeah.
I saw a post on LinkedIn just yesterday about AI, and I could not understand a word of it. And somebody who was themselves an AI expert said, "What are you talking about? I can't understand a word of this." What the person was trying to do was to establish their status by just bombing the audience with all these technicalities. But that's no good. What you need to do is you need to show that your expertise is within reach, but above. It's what in education they talk about, this idea of like the zone of proximal learning, having a more expert other person, but it's no good if they're acting in a way that's way more expert, because then you can't connect with them. They're sort of the level you'd aspire to get to in that domain. So what we always look for are what we call recognition moments. So to give you an example, in the philosophies, in the Help Me Find My Voice book, which is about our Oracy mini book, we ask teachers to think about children they know who are playground confident but classroom shy. So they're not shy all the way through. That's not who they fundamentally are as a person. Out in the playground, they're having a laugh, part of the banter, but when they come into the classroom, they shut down, and you're very unlikely to hear their voice unless you make a big effort to open them up. And with that, as soon as you say that, teachers think, I know people just like that. I hadn't thought of it before, but now you say it's obvious, and you've then got them hooked in. Because what you're doing, you're not hitting them with something new, you're hitting them with something that they already know, but they didn't realise they knew. It's a little bit like when you see a good whodunit, and at the end, in a good whodunit, you think, of course, how did I miss it? That's or a good riddle works like that as well. Of course, how did I miss it? That was really clever of you to work it out. I should have got that. That sort of feeling. And once people have, you see people actually physically, when you're doing this live, you see people nodding as they recognise that moment. Or we'll talk about what's the time of day that children most often act out. And we'll get everyone to say it once, the register. As soon as you say the register, and then you can talk about that's when teacher power is highest, child power is lowest. The rest of what we're trying to convey comes in on the back of that little story that is recognition. And we find ones like that for each of the sort of points that we're trying to make. So you're connecting your expertise with their experience. If you can find the thing that, say you're one of my brothers has a business making stairs. If you can find the thing that annoys builders when they commission a set of stairs, and you can mention that, they're then a builder. Oh yeah, I remember that time when that happened. What a bunch of muppets those people were. We ought to get specialists in. Do you see what I mean? Yeah,
it's that human connection. It's that moment when you go, I get it, or I recognise it, isn't it? But you probably hadn't thought about it, and you're giving someone the opportunity to recognise those times, but with a different label, arguably.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's made me think about, that's arguably the sort of the opposite of really polished AI content, isn't it? It's not really polished at all. So you've talked a bit about it, but tell me your thoughts around sort of over-polished content then.
So I think people, nobody likes being sold to. Nobody likes being made to feel stupid. And so if you produce content which does both of those, it's probably not going to be serving you. I think there's also this desire now in what people read to feel a voice coming through. I think it's quite rare. In fact, I cannot recall this ever happening to me where I've seen a marketing communication and I felt, that was a bit too kind of informal. That wasn't official sounding enough. I don't feel that had been kind of properly run through a committee in order to make sure it was written in the house style, etc., etc. People are up for playfulness. They're up for for something which feels, real and human. That's right.
Yeah.
So
it's meant to. But now with the technology available in AI, and obviously we're sort of at the beginning, there's so much more to go.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can add tone to it and
Yes.
tweak it and make it sound
Yeah. Yeah.
personal, humorous, cheeky,
Yes.
engaging, pattern interrupting, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to get harder and harder to spot, isn't it, and differentiate?
It will get harder to spot and differentiate. And actually, what will happen is that the people who are using it well are using it in a way that it is AI generated or AI augmented, but it still sounds authentic to them. So just to share my process on that with a particular part of my writing.
Yeah, please.
The business I didn't get round to mentioning earlier on is our business to. All our other things are business to business, but our business to consumer one was originally called Gift. We now trade under that and Philosophy for Home Education, and that had a 40-year history of running courses for gifted children, and then during lockdown we pivoted to include home educated children, and now it's a mix of those who rub along very happily. Some kids are both, and so on, but that's selling online courses and residentials to the general public. The course descriptions for that, which I inherited from my predecessor, always have always been, they've always had to do a few different jobs. They've had to signal to teachers and parents that there's some worthwhile kind of serious learning here. They've had to signal to kids that they're going to be fun and interesting. And they've also had to convey enough information about the course to make sure that the kids that choose that course are the kids that are really going to want to be on it, so they don't think, oh, I picked the wrong label.
Yeah.
So the writing style for those is really, really specific. It's quite playful. It even has a certain rhythm and cadence to it. And because I've been doing those for a long time, I was able to feed 50 of those into ChatGPT. Say, first of all, what I want you to do is to analyze the style of this type of writing. It absolutely nailed the description, even picked up on aspects of my style that I wasn't consciously aware of.
Wow.
So I was having some of those recognition moments there in what it was saying to me. And since then, whenever I want to do a course description, I just say, can you give me 5 titles for a course about this? Oh yeah, call it that, do a course description, and I might do a little bit of light editing. But it sounds, in 5 years' time, if you mix them up, I wouldn't be able to tell which ones were by me and which ones were by the AI. But that's because I've already cultivated that distinctive style, and I've trained it on myself rather than just on the generic mass of what every human has ever written.
Well, that's the perfect mix, though, isn't it? Because you've invested your time in the technology to make it better for yourself, as opposed to just saying, write out 50 something. You're actually tweaking it to try and make it as close to you as possible. It's saving you time, and it's reflecting you in a better way.
That's right. And I mean, crucially, you've got to also have invested the time in developing your own voice so that it can then imitate that voice. Otherwise, you will sound generic.
Well, that's amazing. And you talked about mostly B2B, but also a bit of B2C.
Yes, yeah.
So what can B2B businesses learn from B2C content?
Okay. Personality.
Yeah.
Yeah, personality, absolutely. I think that there is, and interestingly, I still detect this in myself when I'm delivering live to an audience. If it's a high status audience, unless I check myself, I will end up being more kind of technical, highfalutin, trying to prove my expertise. Whereas if I get a really relaxed vibe from the group, then that's when I relax, when I'm most authentic to myself, and also when I actually do my job best. Yeah. So I think
when you're more B2C rather than B2B in your mentality.
Exactly. Yeah. When you've got the attitude that this is a friendly group I'm talking to, they're already, talk to people as if they already like what you're doing. Because for a lot of them, if you're putting content out repeatedly, that will be the case. Yeah. Don't talk to them as if you've got something to prove. Yeah. Talk to them as if you are among friends.
Absolutely.
And that way you will be more relaxed and you will find better ways of saying stuff. Something I really notice Sometimes when I'm training teachers, 30 minutes into the day, I'll realise this is a really good crowd, and I'll say, "Do you mind if I put my recording device on? Because I know I'm going to find better ways of saying stuff because you've made me feel so welcome." So assume you're already welcome, and then be yourself. Don't try and be the big I am and be highfalutin about what you're saying, because otherwise you end up sounding really stuffy.
And echoing that point, that the B2B element can sometimes, there's too much seriousness, isn't it? And that's what you're saying, trying to prove yourself and put a front on, and it's more kind of stats and technical.
Absolutely.
Whereas I think you've used the word playfulness a few times today. And the B2C storytelling and playfulness is so key, because it connects with somebody. And as you say, when you're with your friends, in whatever environment it would be, everyone's probably naturally more playful and a storyteller.
Yes.
And that is where you're at your most engaged, and that's where people like you the most and therefore respond to you the most. So there is a lot that can be learnt from that.
Yes.
And how do you think businesses are going to implement that? Because you've got to take a little bit of a risk, because the more senior you go, or the accountability of a business, the more it's sort of on you, and you've got to be bold enough to embrace the change and make it human.
Yeah, so I suppose, first of all, a bit of philosophy and then a bit of practicality. The bit of philosophy is, I think a mistake people make is that they see seriousness and playfulness as being opposites of one another. I think the real opposite to each of those is indifference, or not being bothered. There's a lovely quote from Nietzsche, which is man's maturity rediscovering the seriousness you had as a child at play. Because when you see a child playing, they're totally locked into whatever they're doing. So don't think of seriousness and playfulness as opposites. They're both ways of paying deep attention to things and not just skitting about. In terms of practicality, just get on some improv courses. My new staff, if they don't already do improv, I send them on improv courses, and then they start sending themselves on improv courses quite often, because they really enjoy it. So we're not talking here about stand-up comedy, which is a kind of terrifying business of regurgitating thoughts over and over again. Improv is about playfully making stuff up in the moment. You don't have to be a funny person to enjoy it. Attracts a wide range of different people, and it's a great way of developing that playfulness in yourself and in your staff. So
and with the improv, do you teach improv yourself? I know you partake, but do you?
So I do teach improv. I don't get to teach it as much as I'd like to, because I've got other people who can teach improv for me. I've got other people who do all the bits that I do, but I know more great improv teachers. So usually there's someone else, and I think, well, I'd like to do that, but I'm awfully busy. But I do teach improv to both children and adults, and it threads its way through everything that I do. It really, I wouldn't say it's a way of life, but actually in some ways it is. It's made me a much better listener. I think I used to be an awful listener. I remember I had a coach once. Who accused me, and I know I'm talking too much in this and not giving you the space, but who actually said, "Jason, have you realised that sometimes when I'm talking, you karate chop me?" And I was aghast, and I realised that I had actually got this habit of, I would insert myself back into the conversation, doing a kind of chopping motion as I did.
Oh, you physically actually
I would physically, and I was horrified. I'm totally unaware of that. But improv has made me a better listener,
Well, first, you're not talking too much. We're here to hear from you, not from me. So this is perfect. Absolutely perfect. Have you got any mechanisms then you've learned? You're saying about the karate chop, and that you know that you're then breaking up the conversation to get back to you. Do you now have tells or some things that you can detect that stop you from doing certain things because of improv?
So I think there's just a generally better emotional awareness, because in improv, you're noticing everything about your scene partner so much, because you need to try and work out what's going on in their head, how might I respond to that, so you can construct some fictional reality together without being able to confer about what you're doing at the time. So I think you're just more aware of other people. Also just having a bit more patience. A really good drill to operate in is a thing called "You Said, I Think." This is one of the games we teach teachers, where, for example, just to be both people for a moment, let's imagine it's the question is the hole in the polo part of the polo? And one person says, I think the hole in the polo is part of the polo because whenever you think of a polo, you think of a hole. And the other person might say, you said whenever we think of a polo, we think of a hole. But I think that doesn't make the hole part of the polo because it's just air. You said it's just air, etc. So that, even though it's an artificial thing to do, is a really good way of developing that muscle. And I think just as a way of making sure that meetings are successful and things like that, and also when you're in a sales conversation, just forcing yourself to shut up and listen so that you can then, a discovery call is essentially that you said, I think process, but with an awful lot of you said to begin with, just listening, and then you bring in the you said, and I think that what we've got would match with this, that, and the other, isn't it? The worst thing you can do as a salesperson is to talk too much. So.
You've broken it down very nicely and simply. And so you said that impacts a lot on your business and what you do, and obviously there's particular impacts around language because you're listening and then you're having to apply to it. So can you tell me a bit about? I know we've spoken before a little bit about the clever use of language that you like to use to intrigue people. Sort of almost hook them in.
So this is about kind of capturing those recognition moments. And some of this, by the way, I should give a shout out to a good friend Sean, who's got a website, psychotactics.com. I've done some training with him in sort of marketing and so on in the past, and I think my natural instinct is in this direction as well. But things like finding phrases that have people think they know what they're about. They've got like a hunch of what they're about, but they now want to find out more. They now want to know for sure. Like playground confident, classroom shy. Another one about small talk before big talk. Sides.
Can you expand on that one?
Small talk before big talk is about in the class. So the little story we tell to set that up is, because remember so the explanation of it has all got to fit in 2 sides of A6. So the little story we say is, if you've ever been to a meeting where there's no small talk and you get straight into the subject of the meeting, it's generally bad news. Probably someone's being fired, and people can imagine that, can't they? It's kind of relatable. Even if it hasn't happened to you, you can imagine that frosty meeting. And then what you go on to say is, in most adult situations, we have some small talk before we get into the main subject of what we're talking about. In schools, we very often just go straight to expecting kids to talk about the main questions of the lesson. Whereas if you start with things that are light and silly and build up, you take more people with you. And similarly, small groups building up into bigger groups. So you've got that kind of initial catchy phrase, but then it also gives people something to hang the learning onto afterwards as well. So
it's a good point, because you need to build that human connection, don't you? It's much like if you're sitting in a circle and you're trying to open up discussions, you quite often need the moderator or the person hosting it to start the proceedings.
That's right.
And then everyone else feels comfortable. So the first question isn't on the other person, because they know then they're doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
And it leads by example as well.
And just to generalise from that, you'll notice like playground confident, classroom shy, small talk before big talk, sides themselves. Another one from another book is start before you finish. So we're often with these principles trying to find things that sound a little bit paradoxical, a little bit contradictory. There's a little bit of tension there waiting to be explored. Start before you finish is in our mini book for Duke of Edinburgh leaders, which is called something like Expeditions and Teaching, Doing Both and Staying Sane, acknowledging the pain of teachers in busy lives. And that's about start the next year's expedition cycle, all the planning for that, before this year's expedition cycle has even finished, which is really, really important, both for them, but also for us in terms of managing our workflows. So little flavour of paradox to it, if you see what I mean.
Do you have any other ones sort of business related as well that you might be able to drop in?
Let me think. Business related, because I don't train people in marketing and so on. I think let me just think. What are some of the things we abide by? No, I think most of our word crafting goes into the specifics of each business rather than into business principles in general. So yeah.
But it's all about that, as I say, that human connection.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
then people can
Yeah.
relate to it,
Yeah.
whichever field that they're operating in.
Exactly.
And that's
Yeah.
the most important
Yeah.
aspect. Okay, so we've talked a fair bit then again about content and language. Why do you think, or do you think, that businesses should employ experts for copywriting?
So I think that what a copywriter can do is to take your voice and then make it more economical. Yeah. So it's how do you get that fusion of some authenticity, but then also content which is usable? Because a lot of the work, if you like, I would say that my own writing is split between the personal, authentic stuff, which is me knowing the business inside out and working out what those things are. And then the other skill that I have, which is from having been an English teacher, basically being made up of words. I'm an incredibly wordy person, which is the ability to edit it down. Yeah, because authentic voices aren't always economical voices. So I think that if you can, a really good way for someone who isn't themselves a writer to work this would be, I would say, get a copywriter in and have a lot of conversations with them, because unless you are someone who thinks of yourself as a writer, your voice is almost bound to come out more authentically through a spoken conversation. And then what a good copywriter will be able to do will be able to take some of the things they notice in your approach. Maybe there are turns of phrase that you've got when you're talking passionately about your business, and they will be able to then transmute that into copy.
Yeah.
Of course, who you really want to be talking to is not the business owner, but the customers, because the customers come up with much better copy than you or I can.
And do you see, when you talked about AI earlier with your own writing and the sort of the theme that you managed to, or the tone?
Yeah.
Do you see in this capacity AI being a help or a hindrance, or is it a mixture? And depends whose hands it's in.
So
how it's used.
I think one of the tricky things with AI in general is I would characterize it as what I call an incumbents technology. What I mean by that is that it is something that naturally favors and makes more competent people who are already competent at something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like hybrid working, I feel, is another kind of incumbents technology, because if you've already got the skills, then hybrid working saves you the commute and means you can, spend more time being good at the thing you are already good at. It's not so great for getting good at something that you're not good at already.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And if you haven't already got the writer's chops to be able to distinguish really good copy from less good copy, then you can't use AI to best advantage, because what AI is great at is being kind of part of that process to save you time. Oh. It can be good for ideation. It can be good for elaboration. But if you just give it an initial prompt and get it to do the whole thing from start to finish, unless you're very good at telling quality from bad, you don't really know what you're getting.
So it's only as good as the person using it.
I would say so, yeah.
At the moment.
But also it can make the person using it better.
Yeah.
It's a bit like a true version of whatever it was that Tim Bell said about cocaine, that cocaine makes a good man great. I don't think that's probably true for anybody in the company of the person taking cocaine, but it is true of AI. I think it can make a good productive worker in a particular form of wordage into a great worker.
Yeah, very good points. Okay, you mentioned to me on a different day that conferences are kind of a new strategy for yourselves, and you've got some tips and ideas as how to maximise
Yes.
them. Could you please share them with us?
Yeah. So in previous kind of incarnations of different businesses that I've had, I've done trade shows and conferences before, and in the past, I've never found them very productive. Quite a lot of effort. And then you spend most of the day being really bored. You maybe get a few people coming along. You think they're really juicy leads. They don't always come to anything. Yeah. So what we've now settled on is a pattern where three things have to align for us in order for us to know that we're going to have a great time at a conference.
This is before the conference, before you decide whether to go to a conference?
Yeah, okay. That's right. So if these three ingredients are there, one is we need to be able to get some sort of speaking or workshop slot at that conference. Yeah, if we can get that, then not only do you have that workshop as an opportunity to prove your expertise, but even if only 10% of the people at that conference go to your workshop, they'll have seen your name in the program when they're choosing the sessions. So you're already elevated above all the other exhibitors who aren't speaking. All the other exhibitors are just there to sell people stuff. You are part of the event, so that already
you're the authentic partner there.
Exactly.
And you use that with every introduction.
Yeah, that's right. So that's one key ingredient. Another key ingredient is that we want to be able to get our books into their bags. We want to be able to get, for example, this is our Oracy book. We want to be able to get this into people's delegate packs, so that they are, we can say, oh, did you get your book? Just gives you a nice little opener. Did you get your book? Gives you a nice little opener. And the third thing is knowing that the people who came last year are people you would want to be speaking to this year. So you won't be able to get a list of all the actual delegates that came to the last one, but you want a very precise breakdown, not just of, events organisers will sometimes hedge a little bit and they'll talk about how many tickets they've sold. You're not interested in tickets sold, you're interested in who came through the door, who did they work for, and what was their position. So you need a sense of what levels of the company were they, what sectors were they from, and I would say never ever go to an event that is being run for the first time unless you are someone who has a very high appetite for risk. Because there's any number of places that you could spend your time and your money promoting your business that are well established. It's just not worth the risk of going to one. What are you going to get out of it unless they're giving you some fantastic deal? But if they give you a fantastic deal on the stand, you've still got all that time, that preparation, etc., etc.
But the fantastic deal, there's no benchmark against it.
Exactly.
So what is fantastic in that?
Yeah.
And the points you raised there about the speaking slot and putting something in the kind of the takeaway bag.
Yes.
If you're speaking with the event organizer and you're asking for that, they know that you're serious. So they're more likely then to give you the third point you mentioned, which is about the previous year's delegates or companies there.
That's right.
Whereas if you're just going as an attendee and you're asking for that, there's nothing in it for them.
That's
so
right.
That's a good sort of number of layers that you're putting into. And you also mentioned previously about the power of data capture.
Yes, yeah.
So how are you sort of judging that? Because they can say you've got X thousand or X hundred of email addresses or contact details. How are you working out or trying to work out how effective that data is for you?
I think the thing is that the data that we get from them, the general list of delegates, even if you've got contact details for them, those aren't going to be the people who provide value for you. It's all about actually capturing yourself. Even if we knew we were getting the email addresses of every single person there, makes no difference. We have to capture all those email addresses during the day ourselves, because if we haven't had that personal interaction, then communication from us is not going to mean very much. So
it's zapping them on their delegate pass,
that's right. That's right. And you have to be so front-footed. It astonishes me how many people I will see running stands at conferences where the staff, they're just sort of sitting there.
Stand there with their head down.
Standing with their head down, no eye contact. It doesn't matter what you speak. We have did you get your little book? But find something that you can do that allows you to open your mouth to every single person who comes past. You've got to be like a velociraptor. You've got to keep going out there and hunting all day long, because otherwise it's quite difficult for a trade show to justify, or conference to justify its expense, because there's an awful lot of people just walking by. You've got to get out there to maximise the number of people you speak to, but also you've got to be a little bit ruthless with the conversations you do have, because you will find you get lots of time wasters, people who might well be in this is a common pattern. People who are competitors who are happy to engage you and so on. So being willing to kind of very quickly terminate a conversation in order not to miss the next person who's coming past.
These come back to your skills you mentioned earlier about the importance of language,
yes,
and arguably with the improv about listening.
Yeah.
Rather than it looking good of you speaking with someone, if it's not good use of your time, you need to cut it politely.
Yeah.
So, and that's how you're maximising the conference. How do you, when you look back on a conference, is there a metric or anything you look back and decide that was a success because?
So we look at the total amount of bookings that come in over the course of the next 6 months. Not necessarily to be delivered during those 6 months, but where the conversation's been had and it's been put in the diary, within those 6 months. And if we get all those things aligning, and we've had, 5, possibly now even 10 times what we put in to a conference where all those three have aligned, that has then lured us to think, oh, well, we haven't quite all those ingredients there. Let's give that one a go. It sounds good, and it's bombed. So my message would be really ruthless. Most of the best trades. A lot of the best trades shows you go to will be the ones you decide not to go to in terms of your bottom line, but if you can get everything aligned, that the having a bit of not marketing, but a mini book, something that adds value in the delegate bag, is great because it's something that not a lot of people do, and it's relatively cheap, generally speaking. The conference organisers don't perceive the value of it as much as they do other things. So typically, putting the books in the bags for everybody might be a quarter. Sometimes it's not even 10% of the cost of having a stand, because what organisers are used to is just people sticking in a leaflet. Well, you could stick as many leaflets in people's bags as you want. They're probably going to go straight from the bag into the bin at home without briefly seeing daylight. But if you've got a book, a little mini book, people don't throw that away.
Yeah, that's true.
People don't throw that away. So that is the key ingredient for us, is getting the books in the bags.
And do you also have a stand as well, or are you?
We do have a stand. Yeah. So stand, presentation of some sort, like a workshop, and the mini book. If you've got those three in there, and from the previous year, these are who we're expecting, these are the kind of people that actually turn up on the day, then you've narrowed the odds of wasting your money. But you've still got to, on the day, be incredibly front-footed. You almost need to, I would say, for one thing, let your staff know. If you've got 3 staff on a stand and the total cost of getting them there is, let them know, look, it's cost £1,000 to get each one of you in front of people here today. So, this is the easy bit, is just being really present and engaged. And also, if you've got a situation where, as a lot of things are, you've just got the bit before, the breaks and the lunch, because the rest of the time people are in parallel sessions, find better ways of using the parallel sessions. So something that we will offer is during those parallel sessions, or every other slot, we'll offer free consultations to people. So people actually get bored of listening to people. You don't want to go spend the entire day going from one workshop or presentation to another. So the chance to say, this is just going to be me and you, or you and your 3 colleagues, and you can have 20 minutes or half an hour of our time on whatever aspect of what we do you want some guidance on. That's one, it's less boring than sitting there, waiting for the next break.
And it sounds more informal than a meeting, doesn't it? It's a conversation.
That's right.
And people do like to talk about what they do or their business, and then it's a two-way conversation. You built that rapport.
Absolutely.
And no doubt they'll have one of your books then.
Yes,
as well.
indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
So it sounds like you've found a pretty Loctite formula. So thank you. You've saved lots of people some money and hopefully generate this. But where do you see the future of trade shows, conferences going then? Because this is now.
Yeah.
And technology is advancing as always very rapidly. Where do you see the future?
So I think that, like everything else, as more and more stuff goes online, you're apt to get more and more craving for face-to-face stuff. I think.
So you're putting the value of that even higher now because
Yes.
there's even more
Yeah,
online and
yeah.
people just sort of hide behind their screen at a
Absolutely.
conference. Yeah,
Absolutely.
makes sense.
But I think also going in with that, there's also the element that when people get released from the screen to go to one of these events,
Yeah.
they'll have more of a social craving
Yeah.
to do stuff there. So if you can find ways of facilitating that, if you can make it feel more of a friendly encounter, if you know the workshops will be where it's at. If you can find perhaps ways of booking people in advance to do, even if you've not got a workshop stand booked, there's nothing stopping you from reaching out to any of your customers who are going to be there to say, we're just going to do an informal get together at such and such a time. There'll be some refreshments at our stand. Come and find us at such and such a time. So things like that, because people will be all the less likely to want to sit through all the sessions.
The refreshments are so prevalent now.
Yeah,
Been to a couple recently, and there's a lot of put your business cards in. They're also making a bit of a resurgence, business cards, as opposed to just being on your phone.
Yeah.
Business cards in a pot, and you might win a bottle of champagne. Again, a way of connecting with people.
Yeah.
There's always the pots of sweets,
Yes.
biscuits, coffee making machines, and then the drinks after. Sort of the midpoint of the afternoon. All of these different ways of getting people to at least take notice.
Yes, that's right.
And
That's
talk rather than type.
Yes, indeed.
Which is great. Yeah, lots of helpful tips. Thank you for that.
And just one last thing on trade shows as well. I'm sure most people do this out of sheer boredom, but when there are those downtimes when all the delegates are in some popular keynote, just work the room that's still there. We've made some fantastic connections with other businesses from both being at the same event, and then we'll publicise them, they'll publicise us. There's lots of people with the same customer base, but who are not competitors in the slightest, and we're actually being given access to some of your content might well be like a valuable added service for their customers. So what you would be happy to give away free as a lead magnet might be something which to them is like, oh, this is great, this is something else we can offer to our network as part of our general looking after them. So just speak to everybody who lives and breathes in the room. The point where you find you're bending the ear of the person who puts out the biscuits, then you know that your job is done.
But you're maximising every moment.
Yeah.
And they do cost a lot of money, and you need a return on investment.
Absolutely.
And there are quiet and dead times, but your point is don't let them be quiet and dead times.
Yeah,
maximise it.
Yeah.
Very good. I've got one final question for you that you won't have any idea what it's going to be.
Okay.
I know you're intrigued, aren't you?
I am.
The most intrigued you've been. No, I'm kidding. I was wondering what you think has been your greatest success so far in business.
Oh, my greatest success so far in business. I would say it has to be, and this is sort of more because of the impact of it rather than the commercial side of it, although commercially it's doing okay now, is sort of this business gift, now philosophy for home education as well, that I took on from a colleague that had been going for 40 years looking after gifted kids.
Yeah.
And they're a very underserved population because, as one expletive deleted at a conference said, don't worry about your brightest kids, they'll be all right whatever you do. That's the prevailing attitude. It can't be more true, because for these kids, their academic needs are sometimes their emotional, their mental health needs as well. And so I think managing to steer that business through choppy waters, it was pretty much only residential in the run-up to the pandemic. And then with a bit of help from a wonderful home-ed mother who just gave me 100 kids to run philosophy classes for online at exactly the right moment, steering that, pivoting that both to a wider audience, including home-educated kids and general-purpose kids, and going from being 99% face-to-face to being 100% online for a few years, and then reinstating the residentials on the other side, and being able to provide the same experience to those kids that in some cases their parents had before I came on the scene. I think that's the thing that I'm proudest of, because I know how important that work is to the kids and families that are involved. And and it's also really important to me, and it's a wonderful way of being with the kids, so being able to use the different business skills I've drawn in and a really good team of people to keep that business going through choppy times and have it come out sailing with flying colours on the other side, that would definitely be it.
It's very fulfilling, isn't it? That?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a good news story to finish
Indeed,
on.
yeah.
But listen, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, well, thank you,
Great
Mike.
talking with you. I'm sure everyone will put into practice all of your tips and ideas. So thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you for inviting me.